Hello and welcome to a Galadriel of Lothlórien deck tech from Finx MTG. Thank you for tuning in. So we're going to be going through the 99 cards in the Commander deck for this lovely Commander here. And the idea of this one is to be a power level around 6, which I have in the description more of the details on that, from a scale of 1 to 8 for casual Commander. So when I first saw this Commander, I was very impressed. It's Simic, green, and blue. But if you're looking at the abilities here, again, 3/3, so it also has some toughness. It can survive some hits. But the first ability, whenever the ring tempts you, if you choose a creature other than this one, you get to Scry 3. Now, Scry 3 is actually a large number to be able to scry. You can really filter through your deck and find the cards you need. But then the big ability is this second one here. Look at this one. Whenever you scry, you may reveal the top card of your library. If a land card is revealed this way, put it onto the battlefield tapped. And it's any land card, doesn't matter what kind. Not if it's a basic or a utility land. So really just looking at that second option there started to remind me of another commander that has been out for a while and was doing a lot of damage. Thrasios Triton Hero. So this is a card that's a bit more powerful. This is more of a cEDH card. But the beautiful thing with this is that this one, for 4 mana, you scry 1, and it has a similar mechanic of revealing the top card of the library, putting it onto the battlefield. Otherwise, you draw a card. So this one has the draw card, and that's what makes it super powerful. But I've seen this go off so many times that the similarities here are pretty striking. If you can keep putting a bunch of tapped lands into play, or if you have some way to untap them as they enter, or if you're just trying to build a big mana base for a big turn on the next turn, there's a lot of advantages you can get from that. So going through the deck here, we wanted to go in a couple different directions with this one. We have the Scry mechanic as a one major contributor to the whole deck. Then we have the ring tempting. We're going with the Lord of the Rings thing here, so we have to do the ring tempts you and see where that takes us. So to start off with, put the commander on the side over here, and we'll look at what we're trying to do with this deck here. There's a landfall theme here because we're easily putting lands into play with our commander over there. So, Avenger of Zendikar is a good thing to get to when you want to go for a win condition and close out the game. And again, this is not an expensive card. The idea is you can play this when you play a land on top of it. All of your plant tokens that were created get +1/+1. So usually you can get up to about 3/3 creatures and swing in for a huge amount of damage. There's also ways to put this in a manner that's like flash or bring it in on an opponent's end step. So on your turn, they can attack right away. And you can swing in for the kill. We also have Rampaging Ballots. So this one is a 6/6 trample, but when a land enters the battlefield, you make a 4/4 creature token. Again, triggering every time your commander brings a land into play. Zendikar's Royal. This one enters when a land enters the battlefield, you get a 2/2 creature onto the battlefield. So again, any of these being out means that anytime you're playing lands, you're getting huge value, not only in terms of mana that you can use on the next turns, but you're getting big creatures. Now this is a different one here, Wren's Run Packmaster. So it's 4 mana, but if you leave this on the board, it does pretty well. The champion and elf isn't really a big concern because we have a lot of elves that go with a theme in this deck. But for 3 mana, you can put a 2/2 green wolf creature token onto the battlefield. And it gives wolves you control Death Touch. And that's a big factor here. Again, it's a 5/5, harder to get rid of. And so what you can do here is every turn you're just making a bunch of 2/2s that all have Death Touch that nobody wants to block. And a big factor with this is, again, when you're having the lovely ring card tempting you, when you get down to this third option here, whenever your ring bearer becomes blocked by a creature, that creature's controller sacrifices it at end of combat. So a lot of these cards that are making tokens for us, if we attack and we put some kind of lure effect on them where they have to block with all their creatures that are available, that means they're going to have to sacrifice their entire board after combat. So that's a little trick that this deck likes to pull off if it can. Next one, we have Sandworm Convergence. Again, just making a 5/5 creature every turn. And it also protects you from items like dragons so that they can't attack you or planeswalkers you control. Sylvan Awakening is a nice way to swing in there out of nowhere with a lot of 2/2 creatures when it turns all your creatures into indestructible and haste. So that's pretty big right there for a nice swing. We have Hornet Queen. This is to keep some of the heat off of you while you kind of do your thing and you're doing your scrying mechanic. And the idea is that you scry once the Scry is resolved, then it triggers the Galadriel trigger. Then you put the top card revealed, and if it's a land, you put it onto the battlefield, and that's the order that you do it. So that takes a bit of time to go through your deck and really build up some mana base, but this will pretty much keep everybody at bay that's trying to attack with all of the death touch insects that it creates. Fierce Empath is just a way, it's an elf again with the synergy, but it gets a mana cost 6 or greater creature from your deck and puts it into your hand. So it's a bit of a tutor and an affordable one, and it's a creature on the board. Chord of Calling is the best way to get your endgame scenario here. If you Chord of Calling for Avenger of Zendikar, you should be able to win on your next turn there. So you do that on the opponent's end step before you, and then you're putting 1 or 2 lands into play, and you're winning on that turn. So again, we have a number of the win conditions there. And then how are we actually going to get to those win conditions, right? So we have a number of cards here that Scry, and I'll go through these quickly, and I'll also have the deck list listed in the notes below. But to start off with, we have Fall of Gil-galad. An enchantment, just Scry 2, put 2+1/+1 counters on target creature you control for the next step. And then on the third one, you have it fights another creature, and it kind of kills your own creature, which is good in this deck because it'll give you an advantage to draw cards. We have Arwen. Again, this is a 2/2. You get a +1/+1 counter on target creature whenever you Scry, and for 6 mana, you can Scry, an elf again. Kinesos gives you an extra number on your Scry. So if you're scrying with Galadriel's trigger and you would Scry 3, you would Scry 4 instead. So that's just there for that. Elvish Mariner, whenever this attacks, you Scry 1. Also has an ability to tap down opponent's creatures. This is a Prognostic Sphinx. Just a nice flying creature. It's a little bit expensive on the mana cost, but you can discard a card to give him hexproof. So that's a way to get around removal spells. And when he attacks, you're scrying 3. And when you're scrying 3 in this deck, with the amount of lands in it, you should almost always be hitting a land that you can trigger with Galadriel to put into play. Stormwing Entity, flying creature prowess. It costs 3 less to cast, so it only costs 2 mana to cast if you cast an instant or sorcery spell this turn. And again, we're casting a lot of Scry spells, so that should trigger pretty often. Then you have, when it enters the battlefield, it Scries as well. Next up, Treasure Map. This is just a nice card that also has some card draw enabled, as well as 1 tap and you Scry 1. And it gets a landmark counters, and then when you get 3 or more landmark counters on it, you remove them, transform it into this kind of a cool land here where you can actually get some other advantages. You can sacrifice a treasure here to draw a card. So it's a little bit of card advantage there. And it goes with the scrying mechanic. Next up, we have Selborn the Wise. So this card here, when you attack with 1 or more elves, you Scry 1. Just the recurring Scry is really good with this commander because that means every turn you're getting another trigger on this to put a land into play. And whenever you Scry, it gets +1/+1. So if you're scrying a few times, you can actually, if you Scry 3, this gets +3/+3. So that's huge there. It's a 6/6 when it attacks. Serum Sovereign. We have this in here for the Scry ability, but also this is a card draw ability because whenever you're casting those Scry spells, you can start putting oil counters and remove the oil counters, and then you draw and you Scry again. So you see how you can start chaining a bunch of items here. Then you have the simple spells like Track Down, Scry 3, reveal a top card of your library. If it's a creature or land card, draw a card. So it has card draw, your Scry, and you're putting a land into play. You're doing 3 things with 2 mana card there. A 1 mana card, Scry 3. If it's a creature card on top, you draw a card. So you can Scry, put the creature on top. After that, you put a land. So with this spell, it has to resolve fully. You draw the creature card on the reveal from this, and then you trigger your Galadriel, and you flip the land over and put that into play. Deliberate, 2 mana, Scry 2, draw a card. Joint Exploration, Scry 2. If it was kicked, you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. More land wrap. Preordain, the classic. Now this is a big one, Mystic Speculation. So this has buyback 2, and it's only 1 blue mana to cast. You're scrying 3, and with this effect, when you're getting a lot of lands into play, you should be buying this back every turn. So every turn, you can at least scry 3 and be putting 1 land into play. So if you get this in your hand, that's like the perfect scrying option. Then we also have the recurring scrying option here with the Temporal Anchor. Yes, it costs 6 mana, but every upkeep, you're scrying 2. And then you can put 1 or more of those cards on the bottom of your library while scrying. So you can exile them, and then during your turn, you can play the cards exiled with this guy. So instead of scrying them, put them to the bottom, and you don't see them for a long time, you exile them with this, and you can still cast them. That's the added ability here. Crystal Ball, recurring 1 mana, tap, scry 2. Life Crafter's Bestiary. At the beginning of your upkeep, you scry 1, and it also has the ability, if you pump some mana into it, you draw a card when you cast a creature spell. Ooh, and then the Planeswalkers. So Nissa, Steward of Elements, fits really well into this deck. Because it's an X mana Planeswalker, and you're getting a lot of lands into play, you can actually cast this for an insane amount, and it's very difficult to take care of a Planeswalker that has 8 or 10 loyalty. And each time you +2, you're scrying 2, and again, upping that loyalty, making it harder to hit. The other abilities can come into play as well. They don't go as often. The main thing is just that scrying ability. You could always just play this on 1 and just get it out there to start scrying if you have nothing else. Jace Mirror Mage, and another one of the great Planeswalkers for a Scry deck, and this is a pretty cool artwork here from Zendikar Rising. When you kick this, you should always be kicking it. So for 5 mana, you have this, and you have a copy of it. The copy only has 1 loyalty, and it's not legendary. Then you uptick both of them, so you can scry 2. That's 1 instance. Then you, with the other Planeswalker, scry 2 again. That's a 2nd instance, and potentially put 2 lands into play. And again, you're looking for whatever card you need for the situation that you have on the board, and that's why the scrying mechanic is so big, because you're really filtering for what card do I need next for my game situation. So that goes through the main scrying cards. And because we're doing all of that scrying, we do have some of the mana ramp cards. We don't have as much as usual in the deck, but we have the ever faithful Soul Ring, which is in every deck ever made. Then we have Wood Elves, because it goes with the Landfall mechanic. You can bring a forest into play, and you can search for one of your dual land type cards that's a forest and an island. I have in this one the tap land because it's a budget deck. Then we have Elvish Mystic and Land the War Elves. So when you're getting these out on turn 1, that means that on turn 2, you can cast your commander with the 2 land drops and one of these guys. So that gets you going a turn earlier, and that's why they are in there. On the removal side of this, how do we deal with the opponent's creatures and still push our strategy? This one is for 3 mana, a little bit expensive, but destroy target artifact, enchantment, or creature with flying, scry 1. And again, it's an instant, and that's what you need to be able to take care of the enemy creatures, enchantments, or the enemy enchantments and artifacts. Something that's going to really do something, make them go off on a turn. Reclamation Sage, a staple, 3 mana. You just go and take out whatever is the biggest problem on the board right there. Aether Sprouts. So we need some type of board wipe, and we're in green and blue, and this is one that can really set back the opponents. And for you, it doesn't really matter if people's creatures go, if people's creatures are gone and you're able to just keep building up your mana, you have so much mana they just can't catch up because they have to cast 1 or 2 spells a turn when you can cast anything in your hand. So I like this one, and it's focused on if somebody's attacking you for the win, you can cast this. Otherwise, if they're attacking your opponents, just let them keep going through. The other board wipe here, we have Devastation Tide from the Lord of the Rings Commander sets. Return all non-land permanents to their owner's hands. And it also has the Miracle cost for 2 mana. You can cast this if it's the first card you draw that turn. So if you need it and you play a spell where it draws you a card and this is it, you could always do that as well. Predator Flagship, I also had this in my Eldrazi deck. It's a lot of fun, and we can get to this because we have so much mana coming into play. For 7 mana, you can basically pay 2 mana to target any creature to give it flying, and then tap this and pay 5 mana to destroy that creature with flying. So very good single target removal. And the answer to everything, Beast Within, 3 mana, destroy target permanent. That includes those pesky lands that people shouldn't really be running in the 5 or 6 kind of power range, but if there's something on the board that you just have to take out, you use this. We also don't have so many removal spells here, so we have some of our cards for recursion to get items back from the graveyard so we can, again, grab this back when we need it later on, and we're scrying into what we need. Put these down over here. And for the ring tempts you, we have Soothing of Smeagol. Return target non-token creature to its owner's hand. The ring tempts you. This one is countering target creature spell. If it was a legendary spell, the ring tempts you. This is great to counter an opponent's commander or one of those big legendary creatures that's going to win them the game. And again, this is the Soothing of Smeagol is also a very good removal card. You're kind of drawing for a little bit of time. You need to slow the opponents down, and those cards do that really well. We have the Rangers card here. You grab control of a creature with power 3 or less, and then the ring tempts you. It's not the strongest card, but it's a little bit of a... It's in there because the ring tempts you in this one, and you're getting a little like a dork or some pesky, annoying creature that's low power. Enraged Huron? How do you say that one? Treefolk. Trample. It's 4/5. When enraged, Huron enters the battlefield. The ring tempts you. Scroll of Isildur. Gain control of up to one target artifact for as long as you control Scroll of Isildur. The ring tempts you. So here you can be snagging somebody else's soul rings, or you could be going later on in the game for skull clamps and Bolas's citadels or anything like that. It also has card draw because you're slowing the opponent down on the second part of the lore here, and you tap up to 2 target creatures, putting a stun counter on each of them. Then you draw a card for each tap creature target opponent controls on the third. And for 3 mana, it's good to get it out there and start doing work. Birthday Escape. Draw a card. The ring tempts you. Just a cantrip spell here. Then we have Gandalf, Friend of the Shire. It has Flash. You may cast sorcery spells as though they had Flash. Whenever the ring tempts you, if you choose a creature other than this dude, then you get to draw a card. So it's really here for the card draw ability. Dundane Rangers. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, if you don't control a ring bearer, the ring tempts you. Elrond, Lord of Rivendell. This is a way to continuously scry with this and also get additional ring tempts you triggers. So with this one, whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you're scrying, and then if it's the second time that it's happening in a turn, the ring tempts you. Horses of Brunnen. Return up to 2 target creatures to their owner's hands. Scry 1, the ring tempts you. Kind of like a board wipe almost in that regard. So here you have a number of the ring tempts you card, and some of these are recurring. There's also some other ones that you could add in here that some of the cards I just didn't have, or some of them maybe too high of a power level. You can also put in the Inherited Envelope artifact that gives you mana. That one just is a new card from Lord of the Rings that also can work in this deck, where it's basically just a ring tempts you card. We also have our recursion cards like Conduit of Worlds. You can play land cards from your graveyard. So yes, if you had a strip mine or a wasteland, you could go and start blowing up all the opponent's lands and just keep playing them and blowing up their lands all game. But don't do that, because you should just never be doing that. It's not fun in Commander to play like that. Even if you're maybe at the highest 8 power level, if you want to do some kind of recursion like that if you need to. But this is primarily focused on the second ability, where you can get back whatever card you need. Yes, you can only cast that spell this turn, but we want to do the big hitters or the removal spells that are going to save us from losing the game. So that's why that's in there. We also have Eternal Witness, puts a creature on the board and gets the card that you need out of the graveyard back into your hand. Have the nice promo on that one. All right, and then we have a lot of card draw as well. So this just goes with the theme, 2 mana. You just start putting verse counters on this every time you scry. Then you pay 6 mana and draw a card for each verse counter on the Lost Isle of Calling. If it had 7 or more verse counters on it, take an extra turn after this one. Activate as a sorcery. Elrond, Master of Hearing. Master of Healing. Whenever you scry, put a +1/+1 counter on each to X target creatures, where X is the number of cards looked at while scrying this way. So here you're just pumping up all your dudes while you're scrying, which is the main theme of the deck anyway. And then whenever a creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it becomes a target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, you get to draw a card. So that's what if the opponent's trying to remove your pieces and you're just putting counters on everything here and there, it gives you some card draw to replace those. This card is great in this deck. You need a little bit of life gain sometimes. You also need something to get in there with evasion, like a flying creature. Well, this has flying and trample, and it's an X spell, green and blue. When you cast a spell, you gain X life and draw half X cards round down each time. Hydroid Krasis. So you can draw a lot of cards, and then it enters the battlefield with the X +1/+1 counters on it. So then you have a huge flying trample hitter as well. So this kind of does everything you need to do, and you want to hold this until you have a lot of lands in play from your Galadriel triggers and scrying mechanics. Tathyova is just in any kind of a land or landfall deck. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life and draw a card. Beast Whisperer. A lot of creatures in this deck, so whenever you cast one of those spells, you draw a card with this one. Elegeth Crossroads Augur. This is a Sphinx flying creature. If you would scry any number of cards, draw that many cards instead. So once you got some of your lands into play, you got up to 6 mana, you get this guy out. Instead of scrying 2, scrying 3, you're drawing 2 cards, drawing 3 cards. I mean, that's pretty impressive right there. Pull from Tomorrow. This is an X spell that you can dump all of your mana into when you need to go searching for your win cons or your next items that you want to play. And we like this one because it's an instant. It's not like Stroke of Genius, which costs 1 extra mana. That's 1 less card. Yes, you discard a card here. You can always discard a land because that's not going to be relevant. And you could even play the land with the Conduit of Worlds that you have in the deck if you really needed to. So that's why this one is better. It's 1 extra card versus something like Stroke of Genius and versus cards that are not instants. Okay, so that goes through the main card drawing cards there. There's also a couple of cards that are just interesting items that go into this deck really well. Whenever a land enters the battlefield tapped under your control, choose one. Untap that land or tap target non-land permanent and opponent controls. Tiller Engine is great here because every land that you're scrying into and triggering Galadriel comes in untapped. It's kind of like the Amulet Titan deck in another Magic format. Scoot Swarm. This is just another landfall card, and everybody is scared of this card. As soon as this comes on the board, everybody just wants to kill it. It does just make 1/1s, but you get a lot of 1/1s as you get over 6 lands. Kuru, the Boundless Sky. 4/4 flying Death Touch. But when it dies, the first ability we're not really going to do. Search your library with the 3 land cards, put them into your hand. That's not really a big of a deal. The second one, create an XX Spirit, and X is the number of lands you control. So that's actually really good in this deck because you can be getting an 8/8 or 10/10 Spirit. Now this goes with the theme of the Ring, Revenge of the Hunted. You're giving target creature +6/+6 trample, and all creatures able to block it this turn do so. What you do is you put this on your Ring Bearer when he has up to the, I believe it was the 3rd, yes. When you get to the 3rd rank here, and then the opponent's going to have to sacrifice all of their creatures when they block your guy that's attacking. You could also just use it for a finisher if you need that extra damage. And here we just have another Elf Warrior that can go into the deck, but it has Death Touch. So again, if you're pumping a card like this one up, even with the +6/+6, you can just kill everything. It only has to do 1 damage to each of the opponent's creatures, and you can kill them. So even that, if you don't have the Ring Tempts you enough times. So there you have the other cards that mesh well into the deck. There's also some nice stuff you can put in here, like you can put the Aesi or the the different Serpent. You can put Coma in here. That gets to a little bit of a higher power level. I like that these win conditions are not expensive cards. They're very affordable, and there's just fun things that you can do with the deck with the scrying mechanic. You can scry quickly. You don't need to take a lot of time, and you can go through and have a good time with it. Then we also have some land cards. So I'm going to go over just the top of the land cards here, which are the important ones. A lot of the scrying mechanics. When it enters the battlefield, scry 1, the Grey Havens. Same with the Void here. Crystal Grotto, similar. Path of Ancestry is pretty good because every time you're playing a creature that's an elf, basically, you get to scry 1. Castle Vantress. Okay, this is really good. So you have a land that enables you to scry 2 and trigger your commander's ability to put another land into play. This is a great card to have in play. I was actually thinking about putting Crop Rotation in to get a card like this, or the next one, which is the Lord of the Rings one and the definition of power creep. So this one comes into play tapped unless you control a legendary creature. We're playing commander, so you should have a legendary creature. Adds 1 blue mana, 2 mana, scry 2, activate only if you control a legendary creature. So this one's 4 mana to scry 2. This one's only 2 mana with some clause that isn't really relevant because we have plenty of legendary creatures in here. Either of these cards are great to have in play. And then we have your traditional lands here. We have a Demolition Field just if somebody's trying to get crazy with their lands. We have the one that can destroy it and not make everybody gain another land. It just makes the one opponent and you gain the additional land. Hunter's Maze, sacrifice it. You can draw a card if you're really in a bind because, again, we're going to have a lot of lands. And the rest of them, we have a Mystic Sanctuary for more of the graveyard recursion. Again, this is the Forest Island. that you can get. It enters tapped, but we don't really care about that in this level. And a cycling land Tranquil Thicket that comes in for green mana. So there you have the deck tech for Galadriel. And I feel like this one you can do a lot of different power levels. I was kind of doing the budget one here to see how it feels out, but it's been a fun mechanic to play around with. And I plan on maybe upgrading it to different styles as well, and maybe doing more focus on any one style. If you want to see the full deck list, check out the notes below, and I'll have it listed in there. Have a great day. I'm out.